Can I take second drop? It's your wish, Aman. Like for me, मैं 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 ड्रॉप ले सकती हूँ. It totally depends on you. Hello Alexa. Play हर कर मैदान फतेह. ऐसा क्यों बोला शुभम? It's Nishant, Shubham Sharma, then Pavani Reddy, Pari Kumari, then Ayan, Nishant, then again our Bhava, Alex, Aman. Aman, not Aman. It is Aman. And I think it's Akanksha. And finally Shri. Did I left anyone? No, right? Hello everyone. I don't have timer. वो छोटा बच्चा आया था ना, वो लेके चला गया. उसकी माँ ने बोला कि वो लौटा देंगी, लेकिन उन्होंने नहीं लौटाया क्योंकि उन लोगों को पढ़ाई से इतना ज़्यादा लेना देना नहीं होता है. तो I think they probably forgot. Yes, Riya, you are there. Might have slept. Hi सुशांत. अभी मेरे पास ना टाइमर नहीं है ना, तो मुझे कुछ नहीं है ऐसा वाला टाइमर वापस से चाहिए. लेकिन मैं नहीं जा सकती ना टाइमर के लिए. मुझे मैं ऐसा नहीं बोल सकती कि मेरा टाइमर लौटाओ. आई थिंक नामसांग इज मोर रेस्पॉन्सिबल दैन हिज पेरेंट्स. I want my Namsang. I want my brother to return that timer. यार मुझे बहुत ही ज़्यादा ये चुल मच रही है. मेरे पास टाइमर नहीं है तो मुझे टाइमर चाहिए. ऐसा वाला हो रहा है. भालू नहीं ले गया. भालू की भाई ले गया, छोटा भाई. भालू की भाई. भालू तो बहुत ज़्यादा वो है, क्या बोल सकते उसे, रेस्पॉन्सिबल टाइप है. हिडन बाय शुभम. टाइम आउट बाय शुभम. किसी ने कुछ लिखा था क्या? मैंने किसा मैंने पता नहीं क्या पढ़ा अभी. मैं तो सोच रही थी कि हम लोग ना थोड़ा ज़्यादा लोग हो गए ना, तो मैं अपना नाम हटा के स्टूडेंट यूनियन करूँ और लोग ऐसे आ जाते हैं. देखो ना, क्या ही स्टूडेंट यूनियन. हाय जोपालू. जोपालू ओके. ओके ओके. हाँ श्री, मैं भूल गई थी. अभी करूँगी. पढ़ा नहीं, बस देखा मैंने. पता नहीं कहाँ से आया. ऐसा कोई कुछ लिखा भी नहीं था. उसका नाम ही खराब था. अयान आर्यन में क्या टिप्स दे सकती हूँ? मैंने खुद ही कंप्लीट नहीं किया है. मैंने सिर्फ पार्ट 2 कंप्लीट किया था, वो भी रिवाइज नहीं किया है. मॉडर्न फिजिक्स से किया था. है ना. मुझे भी तो अभी टाइमर कुछ नहीं है ऐसा वाला फील आ रहा है. मैं तो अभी 12th में आया हूँ. आई थिंक एक और कोई इंसान था, सास के, वो भी क्लास 12th से था. है तो क्लास 12 के बच्चे यहाँ पर बहुत सारे. आई थिंक शुभम भी क्लास 12 में ही है. शुभम शर्मा, वी शर्मा जिसने लिखा है ना. वो क्लास 12 में ही है। मुझे तुम लोगों को देख के ना, पढ़ते हुए देख के अच्छा लगता है क्लास 12 में। मैं तो इतना पढ़ती नहीं थी शायद क्लास 12 में, मुझे पता भी नहीं था। तुम लोगों के पास शायद पता नहीं कैसे, शायद ज़्यादा रिसोर्सेस होने की वजह से तुम लोग यूट्यूब में आके पढ़ सकते हो, है ना। अब तो क्योंकि फ्री लेक्चर्स हर जगह मिलता है। Other side of YouTube is crazy indeed, this indeed. बाय द वे मैं क्या बोलने वाली थी ना, ये बोलने वाली थी, जो जो बहुत पहले से ना, जैसे ये शुभम, एलेक्स, इन लोगों को पता होगा ये गाना, किसी ने आके यहाँ पर ना कुछ अब्यूसिव वर्ड लिखा ना, फिर मुझसे हैंडल ही नहीं हो पाया। मैं तो लाइव में ही रोने लगी। किसी को पता है वो इंसिडेंट? आई थिंक ये पुराने लोगों को पता है। पता नहीं क्या क्या चीज़ किया है हम लोगों ने। इट्स ओके, इट्स ओके। अभी पढ़े, स्टार्ट करें। टाइमर नहीं है ना तो कैसे स्टार्ट करें, ऐसा हो रहा है, लेकिन कोई बात नहीं, स्टार्ट करता है। ये चैप्टर कंप्लीट करके सोएंगे भी, एटलीस्ट मैं तो सो जाऊंगी। आई थिंक एलेक्स चला गया ना। तुम्हारे सपने में टॉपर तो। चलो, गुड लक एवरीवन। हेलो विजी। थैंक यू पंदू, थैंक यू पंदू। चलो मैं चैट से ऑफ कर देती हूँ अभी के लिए। ओके, गुड लक एवरीवन। गुड लक श्री, गुड लक सिमरन, गुड लक आदित्य, गुड लक पंदू, गुड लक शुभम, गुड लक निशांत, गुड लक अयान, गुड लक आर्यन, गुड लक भावा। लगने से क्या होता है, होने से होता है ना। हेलो स्वयं। 12 में कितने आया था? आई मत पूछो। मैं ज्यादा नंबर बोल कुछ ज्यादा ही ज्यादा बोल दूंगी ना नंबर, तुम गिर जाओगे। मतलब कि अपोजिट वे में बोला। ओके, तुम सीधा सीधा मत समझना। फिर तुम बाद में जाके बोलोगे कि मैंने झूठ बोला। बोथ मेल एंड फीमेल नहीं, यहाँ तक तो मैंने किया था। Outbreeding devices. Majority of flowering plant produces hermaphrodite flowers, and pollen grains are likely to come in contact with the stigma of some flower, same flower. Majority of the flowering plants produce hermaphrodite flowers, and pollen grains are likely to come in contact with the stigma of the same flower. It's okay, ma. Continued self-pollination result in inbreeding depression. Flowering plants have developed many devices to flowering plants have developed many devices to discourage self-pollination and encourage cross-pollination. In some species, pollen release and stigma receptivity are not synchronized. Either the pollen is released before the stigma becomes receptive, or stigma becomes receptive much before the release of pollen. In some other species, the anther and वो हमेशा चोरी करके ले जाता है। इट्स ओके माँ, In some species, pollen release and stigma receptivity are not synchronized. Either the pollen is released before the stigma becomes receptive, or stigma becomes receptive much before the release of pollen. In some other species, the anther and stigma are placed at different positions so that the pollen cannot come in contact with the stigma of the same flower. Both these devices prevent autogamy. The third device to prevent inbreeding is self-incompatibility. This is genetic mechanism and prevents self-pollination. This is genetic mechanism and prevents self-pollen from the same flower or other flower of the same plant, from fertilizing the ovule by inhibiting pollen germination or pollen tube growth in the pistil. Another device to prevent self-pollination is the production of unisexual flowers. If both male and female flowers are present, on the same plant, such as castor and maize. If both male and female flowers are present on the same plant, such as castor and maize, monoecious, it prevents autogamy but not geitonogamy. In several species, such as papaya, male and female flowers are present in different plants. That is, each plant is either male or female dioic. This condition prevents both autogamy and geitonogamy. If both male and female flowers are present on the same plant, such as castor and maize, monoecious, it prevents autogamy but not geitonogamy. It's okay, ma. कोई बात नहीं. You can do this. It's okay, bro. It's okay. If both male and female flowers are present on the same plant, such as castor and maize, monoecious, castor meisma, monoecious. Both female flowers are on same plant. Okay, it prevents autogamy but not geitonogamy. In several species, such as papaya, male and female flowers. Papaya ma dioecious हो. Okay, papaya कस्तो dioecious plant हो. Monoecious castor र meisma हुन्छ ल. Present on the same plant, such as castor and maize. If both male and female flowers are it prevents autogamy but not geitonogamy. In several species, such as papaya, male and female flowers are present on different plants. That is, each plant is either male or female dioic. This condition prevents both autogamy and geitonogamy. Okay. Pollen-Pistil Interaction. Pollination does not guarantee the transfer of right type of pollen. Compatible pollen of the same species as the stigma. Often pollen of the wrong type, either from other species or from the same plant, if it is self-incompatible, also lands on the stigma. The pistil has the ability to recognize the pollen, whether it is of the right type, compatible, or the wrong type, incompatible. If it is of the right type, the pistil accepts the pollen and promotes post-pollination event that leads to fertilization. If the pollen is of the wrong type, the pistil rejects the pollen by preventing pollen germination on the stigma or the pollen tube. Or the pollen tube growth in the style. The ability of the pistil to recognize the pollen followed by its acceptance. The ability of the pistil, pollen pistil. The ability of the pistil to recognize the pollen followed by its acceptance or rejection is the result of a continuous dialogue between pollen grain and the bill. This dialogue is mediated by chemical components of the pollen interacting with those of the pistil. It is only in recent years that botanists have been able to identify some of the pollen and excuse me some of the pollen and pistil components and the interaction leading to the recognition followed by acceptance or rejection. As mentioned earlier, following compatible pollination, the pollen grain germinates on the stigma to produce a pollen tube through one of the germ pore. As mentioned earlier, the compatible pollination. Following compatible pollination, the pollen grain germinates on the stigma. Pollen grain germinates on the stigma to produce a pollen tube through one of the germ pore. 2.12b. Pollen tube growing through the style. Pollen tube growing through the style. Pollen grain germinating on the stigma. Pollen grain germinating on the stigma. Pollen tube growing through the style. Lower section of pistil showing path of pollen tube growth. Male gamete. Vegetative nucleus, male gamete. Okay. Filiform apparatus, synergid, egg nucleus, synergid, plasma membrane, central cell, polar nuclei, male gamete. It is only in the recent years that botanists have been able to identify some of the pollen and pistil components and the interaction leading to the recognition followed by acceptance or rejection. It is only in recent years the botanists have been able to identify some of the pollen and pistil component and the interaction leading to the recognition followed by acceptance or rejection. And the interaction leading to the recognition followed by acceptance or rejection. Okay. As mentioned earlier, following compatible pollination, the pollen grain germinates on the stigma to produce pollen tube. Through one of the germ pore, the content of the pollen grain moves into the pollen tube. Pollen tube grows through the tissue of the stigma and the style and reaches the ovary. You would recall that in some plants, pollen grains are shed at two cell stages, a vegetative cell and a generative cell. In such plants, the generative cells divide and forms the two male gamete during the growth of pollen tube. Okay. Pollen grain are shed at two cell stages, a vegetative cell and generative cell. In such plants, the generative cell divides and forms the two male gamete during the growth of pollen tube in the stigma. Two male gamete, generative cells divide and form two male gamete, beta male gamete form करते हैं and forms the two male gamete during the growth of the pollen tube in the stigma. In plants which shed pollen in the three-celled condition. In plants, which shed pollen in the three-celled condition, pollen tube carry the two male gamete. Okay. In plant which shed pollen in the three-celled condition, pollen tubes carry the two male gametes from the beginning. In plants which shed pollen in the three-celled condition, pollen tubes carry the two male gamete from the beginning. Plants, the generative cells, and In such plants, the generative cells divides and form the two male gamete during the growth of the pollen tube in the stigma. The generative cell divides and forms two male gametes. Some plants pollen range are set at two-shelled condition. Set at two-cell stage condition of vegetative cell and the generative cell. In such plants, the generative cells divides and forms the two male gametes during the growth of a pollen tube in the stigma. In plant which shed pollen in the three-celled condition, pollen tubes divides and forms the two male gamete during the growth of the pollen tube. During the growth of the pollen tube in the stigma. Pollen tube को ग्रोथ हुँदै गर्छ नि जतिखेर स्टिग्मामा त्यतिखेर के हुन्छ जेनरेटिभ सेल डिभाइड गरेर दुईटा मेल ग्यामेट बनाउँछ. In such plants, the generative cell divides and forms the two male gametes during the growth of the pollen tube in the stigma. In plants which shed pollen in three-celled, ये जियो मुझे क्यों मैसेज पठा रहे हैं? मैसेज कर रहे हैं अभी. In plants which shed pollen in the three-cell condition, pollen tube carry. In plants which shed pollen in the three-cell condition, pollen tube carry the two male gamete from the beginning. Okay, just not three-cell condition हुन्छ. Pollen tube carry the two male gamete from the beginning. Pollen tube, after reaching the ovary, enters the ovule through the micropyle. And then enters one of the synergy through the filiform apparatus. Many recent studies have shown that filiform apparatus present at the micropylar part of the synergy guides the entry of pollen. All these events from the pollen deposition on the stigma with a stigma until pollen tube enters the ovule are together referred to as pollen-pistil interaction. As pointed out earlier, pollen-pistil interaction is a dynamic process involving pollen recognition followed by promotion or inhibition of the pollen. The knowledge gained in this area would help the plant breeder in manipulating pollen-pistil interaction, even in incompatible pollinations, to get desired hybrids. As pointed out earlier, pollen-pistil interaction is a dynamic process involving pollen recognition followed by the promotion. As pointed earlier, pollen-pistil interaction is a dynamic process following pollen recognition followed by promotion or inhibition of the pollen. The knowledge gained in this area would help the breeder in manipulating pollen-pistil interaction, even pollinations, to get desired hybrid. You can easily study pollen germination by dusting some pollen from flowers such as pea, chickpeas, crotalaria, balsam, and vinca on a glass slide containing a drop of sugar solution, about 10%. After about 15 to 30 minutes, observe the slide under the low power lens of the microscope. You are likely to see pollen tubes coming out of the pollen grain. As you shall learn in the chapter on plant breeding, chapter 9. A breeder is interested in crossing different species and often genre to combine desirable characters to produce commercially superior varieties. Artificial hybridization is one of the major approaches of crop improvement program. Artificial hybridization is one of the major approaches of crop improvement program. In such crossing experiment, it is important to make sure that only the desired pollen grains are used for pollination, and the stigma is protected from contamination from unwanted pollen. This is uh, this is achieved by emasculation and bagging technique. If the female parent bears bisexual flower, removal of anther from the flower bud before the anther dehisces using a pair of forceps is necessary. This step is referred to as emasculation. Emasculated flowers have to be covered with a bag of sweetened dyes. और ज़्यादा नींद आ रही है. Generally made up of butter paper, to prevent contamination of the stigma under unwanted pollen. This process is called bagging. When the stigma of bagged flower attain receptivity, mature pollen grain collected from anther of the male parent are dusted on the stigma, and the flowers are rebagged, and the fruits allowed to develop. If the female parent produces unisexual flower, there is no need for emasculation. If the female parent produces unisexual flower, there is no need for emasculation. The flower, the female flower buds are bagged before the flower opens. When the stigma becomes receptive, pollination is carried out using the desired pollen and the फ्लावर रिबैग्ड. डबल फर्टिलाइजेशन ना कल पढ़ूंगी, और मैं ना आई थिंक 3 बजे आऊँगी. मैं अभी जाती हूँ. ओके, बाय बाय सब लोगों को, बाय बाय. कितना मिनट हुआ? 43 ही हुआ है. 20 मिनट ही पड़ा भाई साहब. मैं जा रही हूँ. कि बाय. मैं कल 3 AM पे आऊँगी.